I want to talk a little bit more about the Supreme Court. They are sitting on their hands right now while the whole country sits in limbo on these OSHA mandates. But Iowa is not waiting. They have gone ahead and sent a letter to OSHA saying they do not plan on complying. Do you expect more states to follow suit?
Yes, and I hope we get a quick decision, though, from the Supreme Court. At least the oral argument sounds like they're leaning towards saying, hey, there's enough evidence here that this is unconstitutional, that the courts will still hear it, and we're not going to make a final decision, but we're going to continue to have a stay, or we're not going to let the mandates go into place. That's what I'm hoping we hear from them, and then we'll see where it goes. But to my mind, laws come from Congress. That's what the Constitution says. They're passed by Congress, and then they are signed by the president. The president doesn't create and sign laws. This is a massive infringement of our liberty, and it's one of the most pervasive laws you can imagine, to force everybody to get a medical care whether they want to or not. How could that possibly be constitutional if Congress doesn't pass it? That, to me, is a big separation of powers issue and a big constitutional issue, and I hope the court will recognize that.
You know, more people should have been outraged when President Biden was mentioning that he didn't know if it was legal, but they were going to do it anyway. And, leave it up to the Supreme Court. That's not how the system is supposed to work, as you pointed out. Let's also talk about something that a lot of people don't think is constitutional either, and that is the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Democrats really pushing hard for this. And we are seeing the shame game in full force right now. It is, if you don't go along with this, if you don't support what they're trying to do with this federalization of our election process, then you are a racist. And there's nothing in between. Bull Connor, George Wallace, we're all the same if you don't support this.
Well, people like Joe Biden need to remember that George Wallace and Bull Connor were prominent Democrats. They're the history of the Democrat Party. Republicans were never these awful racists that they're describing. Republicans really, since the Civil War, have been the heroes of both emancipation and voting rights for African Americans. The other good news is the facts on the ground don't show a worsening problem. They show that we're getting better.
Yeah.
There was a time in the South where African Americans were prevented from voting. It was a terrible time, but we've come a long way. When the Supreme Court looked at this issue in the last couple of years, they said, what percentage of African Americans are voting compared to whites in Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina? Interestingly, African Americans vote as the same percentages of whites or higher. So this is good news. We should all be congratulating ourselves that race relations are getting better, that people aren't being prevented from voting. And so when Biden gets up there and calls people racist or says that it's worse, I think he's stoking racial tension.
Certainly.
He's stoking anger. And instead, we should be so much better than we've ever been, and we should be congratulating ourselves. We have integrated marriages, integrated churches, integrated clubs. We have a whole generation of our young people who don't see people at all based on race. So I think it's awful what Biden's doing. It's stoking racial division, and he really should be ashamed of himself.
And what about this ploy to blow up the whole filibuster? It's by any means necessary. Joe Biden's going to go up there and talk to senators today about this. I do think it's interesting considering how much Democrats used to love the filibuster not that long ago. And your colleague, Tom Cotton, put Chuck Schumer on notice about that. Here's an exchange that we saw yesterday on the Senate floor.
It is the Senate where the Founding Fathers established a repository of checks and balances. The Senate is not a majoritarian body. They will make this country into a banana republic, where if you don't get your way, you change the rules. Those are powerful words, but they're not mine. Every word of my speech today was originally spoken by our esteemed colleague, the senior senator from New York, Chuck Schumer.
I think it's an excellent use of an enlarged picture there. But, I mean, the hypocrisy is just so obvious. Chuck Schumer is shameless as well.
I think it's important to remember that the filibuster protects our liberty. The natural state of man is to be left free of government. We have a minimal amount of government because government's a necessary evil. So the more government you get, the less liberty you have. You don't want it to be easy to pass legislation. You want it to be consensus. You want to build bipartisanship. You don't want the left or the right to quickly pass bills that can take away your liberty. So I think really it's good that the Senate slows things down and that it takes a supermajority, because the vast majority of legislation is really about taking away your liberty, not granting your liberty.
Yeah. Senator Rand Paul, great to see you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.